All right, here we go. All right, so I'm going to have to enunciate because I don't have a wireless mic and I can't get the one that I have to work. So we're going to continue talking about thesis statements. Just a refresher from Friday's class. Thesis statement contains three things: subject plus significance, is arguable, and answers the so what question. And we talked about several things with the thesis in terms of avoiding things like my essay will be about, this paper will cover, and so on. And then we got to working on what a good thesis statement does and does not do. Okay, and some of the common errors that students will make in English 101 in college papers. So, the next one on our list of samples, which was number 3, a good thesis has something worthwhile to say. Here's a thesis that needs some work. I don't like to take courses that are held in big lecture classes at this school. What's the issue here?
I don't like.
Sorry?
I don't like.
Yeah, that's part of it. Nobody cares. This does not answer the so what question. If you don't like big lecture halls, boo-hoo. Sorry, nobody cares. When you have a thesis statement, you need to make it arguable and give yourself something worthwhile to say. So here's a better job on this thesis statement. Large lecture classes provide a poor environment for the student who learns best through interaction with both teachers and peers. Okay, so this is specific. This points to a certain type of student who learns in a certain way. This answers the so what question. Okay? This isn't just a personal preference. This is something that the reader might want to read further on. Try to select a subject that will interest, amuse, challenge, persuade, or enlighten your readers. If the subject is pretty commonplace, find a unique approach or an unusual, perhaps controversial point of view. How social media in 2018 affects somebody's life is a pretty commonplace topic. However, the way that we make it unique is that you talk about how it affects you specifically. And that's how you're going to take a commonplace topic and make it specific and answer that so what question. Okay, a good thesis is limited to fit the scope of assignment. A good thesis is limited to fit the assignment. So here's a thesis that needs work. Nuclear power should be banned as an energy source in this country. It's a pretty broad topic. In a 3 to 5 page paper, it would probably be pretty hard in such a short essay to be specific about this. Okay? So, we need to narrow our focus to fit the assignment. If you're being given a 3 to 5 page essay, let's approach something that we can finish in a 3 to 5 page essay. Because of its poor safety record during the past 2 years and the recent waste leak into the water table, the Collin County nuclear power plant should be closed. We're talking about one plant, and we're giving specific reasons for why it should be closed. A good argumentative thesis provides not only a clear position on an issue, but also suggests the structure of the paper. Suggests the structure of the paper. We have 2 main points here. Which one are they going to talk about first? Well, that's the second one, so... Yeah, poor safety record, probably. Now, you're not handcuffed to this, but in all likelihood, that's what we would expect as readers to see first. In addition, your thesis should show that you have narrowed your subject matter to an appropriate size for your essay. So when I talk about with the social media essay, this idea that if you're on multiple social media sites, you need to kind of narrow it down to the ones that are most important to you or the ones that you use most often, this is the type of thing that I'm talking about. The incontestable thesis Here's a thesis that needs work. The women's movement is good for our country. Well, most reasonable people would say that equality is a good thing. It's hard to debate with this topic. But here's a more specific thesis that gives us something to prove throughout the course of the essay. The Colorado Women's Party is working to ensure the benefits of equal pay for equal work for both males and females in this state. Okay, so this gives the writer something to prove. Has to show how the Colorado Women's Party is doing this, in what ways they're doing this, what equal pay means, all that sort of stuff. Okay? A thesis must be arguable. And in order for it to be arguable, it must present a view that someone might reasonably contest. Sometimes a thesis ultimately says we should be good or bad things are bad. Such thesis statements are so universally accepted that there's no need to prove the point. So, your thesis needs to have some sort of thing that you have to prove throughout the course of the essay. The inflammatory thesis, and this does not mean you're going to set your paper on fire, although I know I've written some papers that probably would have been better off if they were set on fire. But in this case, it means we don't want to insult our reader. Here's a thesis that needs work. We need to limit hate speech because the people who support the right to say nasty things are Neanderthals. It's not thal because in French there's no TH sound. Anyway, it's a Neander Valley in France. Okay, so we're going to lose some of our audience if we use this thesis statement. Who might we lose as a reader if we have this thesis statement? Well, they don't exist anymore, so we don't have to worry about them. It's okay. Okay. In other words, people who support, like avoiding hate speech legislation. I suppose it would be you could make a First Amendment argument and things of that nature. But we don't want to lose our audience. We want people, even if they disagree with us, to keep reading. Okay? So, let's fix it. Although Fish makes a compelling argument about hate speech legislation, he fails to acknowledge the social and economic factors that make hate speech legislation beneficial to people's neighborhoods and pocketbooks. Okay, so the tone is much more even. This thesis acknowledges that the other side has a compelling argument, but I disagree. Here's why. This kind of thesis is much more likely to get everybody to continue reading, even if they disagree with your premise. In an essay where you're making an argument, it's essential to keep an even tone. Otherwise, your audience may not take you seriously. You must keep a level, non-combative tone because it will make your argument more believable by parties on both sides of the issue. This is going to become especially important when we get to the end of the term with the argumentative essay. You want to make sure that you keep everybody reading your work. Okay, and I touched on this Friday, but just to reiterate, a good thesis is easily recognized as the main idea and is often located in the first paragraph. The reason why I say often is sometimes writers will write what's called a lead-in. A lead-in is a paragraph before your introduction that sole purpose is to catch the reader's attention. But at the end of the introduction, we should have our thesis statement. Typically, a good thesis is going to be the last or second to last sentence of the first paragraph. The reader would not know what the essay is about. Remember that the thesis is providing focus for the essay. If you don't really know what the essay is about, how can you provide a focus? Think of an introduction as like a funnel. You start kind of broad, and then you tell the reader about your essay, and you narrow it down to the little spigot, which is your thesis. Okay? So start a little more broad, narrow things down until it culminates in your thesis statement. Questions on that before I move on? Okay. So, let's review the first half of this PowerPoint. A good thesis contains a subject plus significance, answers the so what question, and is arguable. It gives you something to prove throughout the course of the paper. A good thesis tailors the scope of the issue to the length of the paper. In other words, you don't try to bite off more than you can chew. It also provides an accurate forecast of what's to come. We really shouldn't have much in the way of surprises once we get to the end of the introduction in a paper. A good thesis is precise, previewing the organization of a paper. So, the points that you reveal in your thesis, in all likelihood, are going to be the way that you discuss them in the essay. So the final thought on the thesis statements is this. Be open-minded with your thesis statement. The first thing you think of while you're brainstorming does not need to be your final statement. Keep yourself open to changing the focus of your paper as new ideas occur to you. I'm sure I mentioned this on Friday, but a good thing that I learned to do in college was to put my thesis statement on a Post-it note and put it on the side of the monitor. This allows me to see the thesis for every paragraph and make sure that everything that I'm writing relates back to that thesis. And if it doesn't, it's easy to change something on a Post-it note. That's not painful. It seems much more painful to change things once we've typed them. They're not in stone, but it seems a lot harder to change them. Okay, so planning and drafting our paper. Now that we spent some time at the beginning of class working on a journal that does some brainstorming activities, we're ready to start thinking about how we put an essay together. Okay? Your book lists 6 steps for how to put an essay together. Understanding the assignment, zeroing in on a topic, gathering information, organizing information, developing a thesis, writing the first draft. Understanding the assignment. What you're going to find actually is, at least in this class, that we have gone through the process for the first 2 steps already. Yes. Understanding the directions is the key to success with any assignment. Ask or write down questions as soon as they occur to you, and make sure you get clarification from your instructor. Most of us have our phones on us most of the time, or at least they're nearby. No matter what, if you use an Apple or an Android phone, it has a note-taking function. You can write down notes or questions as they occur to you, even if you don't have something to write with. Also, as I mentioned, I believe on Friday, remember that you should read your assignment 3 times at minimum. Once when we go over in class, once before you start your rough draft, and once before you do your final edits. I would certainly encourage you to read it more than that, but the minimum is going to be at least 3 times. Okay, so we've already done part 1. We've read the assignment, had the ability to ask questions and all that. Now we can zero in on a topic. That's what you guys did for your journal today. Students often have difficulty narrowing a topic. Here's some strategies to beat the writer's block. If you have so many ideas that it's crippling, it can cause you not to write. Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, you don't think you have enough to write about. It can cause writer's block. So let's think of some ways that we can avoid that. One way is to tap into your personal resources. As some Major League Baseball players have found out lately, having a history on your social media is not necessarily a good thing. But we can tap into our personal resources. You're writing a social media essay. Scroll through your history. Might be some good, some bad, but you can see what you comment on, what you like, what you don't like, what you tend to post, If it's Snapchat or Instagram, what pictures you tend to post, all these sorts of things. What filters you use. Never understood the making yourself look like a dog thing on Snapchat. That always creeped me out. Keeping a journal or a notebook on your paper. If you have just a note page in your notebook, notes on social media essay. You can write down questions, you can write down ideas as they occur to you. If something strikes you in class, you can write it down. But we're going to be spending, 3 to 4 weeks on each essay. Each essay. It's hard to remember. I don't remember yesterday that well. That's because I'm old. But it's hard to remember something from 3 weeks ago when you're going to write a final paper. Okay? Sorting out a subject. That's part of what brainstorming does for us. Kind of get some ideas on the page so we can sort through this mass of ideas to get to a subject. Asking questions, not just of me. Ask people you know. How do you think social media affects me? How do you think it affects you? These are all things that can generate ideas. Free writing. Just start scribbling stuff on the page. Even if it's, I don't know what to write. Because eventually, as long as you keep that pen moving, you're going to get some ideas. It may be a mess, but messy is fine in the pre-writing process. Also brainstorming. Formal brainstorming like we did for the journal. You can do that at the beginning of the process, see what you got, take what you have, narrow it down, and then brainstorm again. So as we're gathering information, we can do even more brainstorming. Like I said, the initial brainstorming you can probably do, come up with 5, 6 ideas on the topic. Say you want to narrow it down to 3 or 4. You take those 3 or 4, you do more brainstorming on it. Also, maybe even reading about the topic. Read a couple articles from reliable places about how social media affects people. Think if, they may come up with something you didn't realize there was an effect on you. Talking with others. As I mentioned, ask other people, how do you think social media affects you? The answer you get from your parents or older relatives might be quite different than you get from friends. Okay, organizing the information. Have a flexible note system. Your ideas do not need to be the same throughout the writing process. The writing process is fluid. Okay, things can change as new ideas occur to you. Do not be afraid to experiment with note-taking systems. If you didn't have to take notes in high school, you're probably going to have to start doing it in college, at least if you want to be successful. Because you're going to have too much stuff at a quicker pace to remember to have it all be jumbled in your head. Take notes, then you don't have to remember. Having notes will help you if you go back to revise your paper. Now this is why one of the big reasons I encourage students to take notes during the writing process is, say you write your rough draft. The upcoming paper, the minimum word count is 800 words. You write your rough draft on the stuff that you brainstormed. Oh no, I only have 600 words. If you've written that stuff down, you can go back to your notes and say, what else did I think about? You can expand on those ideas, incorporate them into the essay. Or if you needed more details, say when you go to revise a paper, if you choose to revise a paper, you have ideas on the page that you can use to expand your writing. And then create an outline, which is what we're going to be doing next Wednesday, not this Wednesday. I got my dates screwed up. There's 2 types of outline. We're going to be focusing mostly on the topic outline because that's more or less organizing main ideas. this is the kind of the typical type of outline you'll see. It has, Roman numeral 1, introduction. This is what's going to be in my introduction. Roman numeral 2, point 1, body paragraph 1, and you talk about what's there. A sentence outline is a little bit more detailed. Some people find this useful. They need to have their ideas written out. I've encountered a lot of fellow students throughout my time when I was an undergraduate and a graduate student, that they would, for a 20-page paper, they had a 40-page outline. They just had to organize their ideas in a very long form in order to be able to get everything in there that they wanted. Now, of course, you're not going to be writing that much, but it's an example of find the writing or outlining or gathering information that works best for you. Okay, so developing a thesis. Subject plus significance, answers to so what question, and is arguable. Now, this, number 5, and number 4, can be kind of interchangeable, or you might bounce between the two as you're going along. And that's fine. These are a guideline. The numbers that bounce up against one another, you might have to go a step back, go a step forward. If you think you have a great thesis, write it down and then outline. But for a lot of people, you have to kind of get your ideas organized before you can express the focus. Then we write the first draft. And after you write the first draft, you may have to go back 2 steps because your organization doesn't work or your thesis statement doesn't work. Okay, so when you're writing your first draft, have your thesis notes and outline accessible and visible. Now, for you guys, since you're going to be writing your rough draft online, you'll have to just show all this stuff to the camera. Okay? You can't have a full rough draft before you start working on it on camera, but you can certainly have an outline, notes, thesis statement, etc. It's a good idea to double space a rough draft. This gives you room, especially if you're handwriting it, to write notes. If you're doing it online like you would for this class, once I copy and paste it and send it to you, double space it then, print it out, scribble notes on it, where you need to make corrections, where do you need to add stuff, what do you need to cut. For the rough draft, write quickly and just concentrate on getting the first draft on the page. This is why you're going to have an hour time limit on the rough draft for all of your papers, because that's how much class time you would have had. It's just to get your ideas on the page, start getting organized, and then you can move on to the next draft, which might or might not be your final draft. That's a little bit more polished. Take breaks at logical dividing points. However, if you tend to procrastinate, set a time limit to it for a break and stick to it. Again, you all have an alarm on your phone or a timer. Use it to your advantage. If you need to take a 10-minute break, set your timer for 10 minutes and stick to it. If your break is you watch one episode of a show on Netflix, as long as you are honest with yourself and know that after that one show you'll go back to your essay, then that's fine. I think this might be the last slide. Yep. Okay. So any final questions on this PowerPoint as I